Yes, fancy meeting you here. Count Basie, the orchestra. Birdland, right here in New York City. Well, that spotlight falls on three other members of the Count Basie aggregation. Paul Quintachet, Jimmy Wilkins, Marshall Royal, Count in the orchestra, and a little Basie kick.
All right. Big stretch. Oh. And full speed ahead. So, super awesome thing. I got a good friend I've known for 30 years. Hits me up after listening to the podcast yesterday. Told me just a really cool story, about kind of a moment early on in his faith and his connection to the Bible. And as he's telling me this story, it's awesome. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, I've known this guy for like 30 years or more. Why did I never bother to ask? Like, why didn't I just listen? Why didn't I take more time to just hear the people around me and what's going on? And so as we go into the weekend, man, I don't want you to miss the people around you. Just take a moment and remember the people around you. They're the ones that matter more than anything else, right? They're the ones that show up in our lives persistent. And they're the ones we follow Jesus with. And they matter more than anything. So, look, what we're about on this podcast, we're going to talk about some bright spots today. And remember, we're just talking about three things all the time. We're looking at them in different ways, and we're looking at stories, and we're building up tips and tricks and tactics and things that we can do to be better at these skills. Because these are the things that work against Christian division. They're the things that work against our denominationalism. And they're the things that bring unity to the faith so that we can all be nodding our head, yes, more when we talk about Jesus, that there's more agreement in the room because we did these things. One, we got to have better conversations. We got to hear each other. We can't be dismissive and, oh, they're there and that's non-essential theology. And two, we got to stop throwing Bible verses at each other, and we got to start saying, how might the Bible help us come together over the question of Jesus? Which is really a question of how should we be reading it, not what does my theology prove, and using it as a proof text, or a bag of verses we can go into and throw at someone when we want to make our case. And then lastly, if we don't all have a heart for change, we're never going to have peace anyway, right? If I'm never willing to reconsider what I think, there's no unity. I have to be willing to change my view, and I come from some deeply held, strong views, and none of us should hold our views cheaply. None of us should be flippant with the thing that we believe. We talked about that yesterday from Romans 14, that even if we're wrong, going against what we think about Jesus is just as much wrong as anything else. So we don't want to defy our own belief or faith. We want to come to understand deeper and better and let God reshape our understanding and renew our minds. Romans 12, 1 and 2, right? All right, so that's what's in store today, and we're going to do what we do every day. We're going to take another step together towards following after Jesus. We're going to do this together. We're going to have greater unity. Thanks for joining us on Bright Spot Friday, and take it away, Chuck.
And being willing to be less than the least became the greatest of all. Let us imitate him who was King of Kings and yet a servant of servants.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Would you turn on my microphone, please?
It's right here in the hall closet.
Yep. So you're back. And I bet you're wondering why I called this meeting. Such an old joke. All right. What are bright spots? What are we talking about when we do bright spots? And why do we do bright spots Friday? And why is it that every time I start to stream, man, I got to blow my nose here. Hold on. I got to introduce you to our Be Right Back squirrel and help me find a name for this guy. All right, sorry. Nobody needs to see me blow my nose. So, okay, what are bright spots? Now that we got that out of the way, what are bright spots? What are we talking about when we're talking about bright spots? We're talking about the moments where we can see, that's what it's supposed to look like. That's the thing. That's what we're trying to do. And when we can see it in others, it gives us a little bit better sense of how to model it. It stops becoming a theory conversation. It stops becoming a conversation about ancient literature or a conversation about spirituality or something esoteric. And it starts becoming a conversation about that's what Jesus looks like in this aspect when he's lived out, because I'm looking at these two people doing it. That's what a bright spot is. And so when we look at bright spots, are we just talking about like emotional highs and rah-rahs, like yay? Or why do they matter? Well, as I just said, theory and inspiration are important. But we need to see it in action. We're not born as adults. We're born as kids. We're born to families. There's a mother and a father for a reason. And this gives us a picture not only of watching relationships and watching how people relate to each other and respect each other, but it also gives us a sense of how to relate to the world. And then our parents become, in some sense, our model for how to connect to the world around us. We learn a great deal from them just by being around them. And, I hope the one thing I keep telling my kid is, look, I'm your earthly father, but God's your heavenly father. So everywhere I'm messing up, he's not messing up, okay? So just remember to look to him and compare. And that's fair enough. We need the example. We're supposed to go and share the good news of Jesus life to life and person to person. And so it's this interpersonal connection that we have with each other. That's how we grow and that's how we change. And that's what God wants from his children, to look to him, to look to Jesus. Jesus said, I'm only doing what I see my Father doing, right? And if we look to Jesus, we're only going to be doing what God was doing, right? God looks to God and says, that's what I'm going to do, because he's not going to contradict himself. So Jesus is doing what he sees the Father doing, and the Spirit is guiding us to do what Jesus did. It's all the same thing. And so we can look back at those ancient scriptures and we can say, okay, that's what Jesus looked like. That's our model. But how much more if we can see these points of character exhibited in context right around us? And that's why we talk about bright spots, because it creates these aha moments of like, oh, I see how I might have a better conversation with my brother or sister about Jesus. All right, so let's dial back in history just a bit. And I want to talk about a guy named Thomas Cook. Now, I don't know if you've heard about Thomas Cook. I didn't know much about Thomas Cook before I read the quote and had to do some research. I thought, that's a good quote. I'm going to find out who this guy is. But he was a Methodist evangelist, and there's a bunch of people named Thomas Cook. So I'm talking about the one born in 1959, died about 1912, 1913. I don't know why it's got two dates there. Maybe he died on New Year's Eve. I didn't research that part. That's not part of my book report this morning. But look, the claims around him are that he was used to lead more than 5,000 people to a profession of faith. And yet, during all of that, he struggled greatly with legalism, that he had to earn his salvation on some level, that he had to earn his way to God after believing, after accepting the good news that there's nothing you could do to earn your way to God. He just stepped into earning his way to God. And it's possible that a lot of his hard work and preaching the gospel and being involved in God's hand in leading those people to professions of faith, it's possible that in the back of his head, he's thinking works. And so, to take a pause and a bit of a sidetrack here, God uses us knuckleheads whether we're perfect or not, and we don't have to worry and be perfect. We just have to love him and follow him. But what an interesting thing, right? And how many of us, when we came to faith, we thought we kind of got to do the holy hustle, right? We got to get after it. We got to make hay while the sun shines, because God's watching, and we better earn the thing that we were given. And we feel that sense of guilt or the baggage that we carry around with us. And later in his life, he would have an epiphany about the idea that his relationship with God, his work didn't make God love him anymore, right? Isn't that what we tell our children? Hey, look, I know you're being a knucklehead right now, but I want to let you know I don't love you any less than when you're doing the right thing. I hurt for our relationship, but I don't love you less. Well, it took Thomas Cook a while to get to that. And later in his life, he would write this. And let me see if I can pull this up. If you're following my Instagram, here's a pitch for my social medias, because I got no comments yet. If you're following my Instagram, you'll see I posted this morning. A Jesus Follower Podcast is the channel, but this is the quote from Thomas Cook: "How many headaches and heartaches I had in struggling with my bosom foes, the self that I have within me. I had received justification by faith, but was seeking sanctification by works." In other words, I was found just and right before God Almighty because I believed. Abraham believed, and his faith was credited to him as righteousness. That's what Paul tells us. That's what the Bible tells us in Abraham's story, that it was his faith that God validated, not his works, not being the right guy. In fact, much of the story of ancient Israel is God pursuing a bunch of boneheads who always defy him and do the wrong thing, and yet in his love, he still cares and still pursues and still redeems and still takes care of his people. And that should speak strongly to us in maybe some of our darkest moments, right? But the idea is that the sanctification is the working out, right? That we are being made, transformed into the image of his Son, right? That we are being transformed into the image of Jesus. We are being remade into a new creation through the work of God and the Holy Spirit in our life, transforming our mind, our heart, and our bodies. One day there will be a physical resurrection, right? And so we are being transformed, but sometimes we try and take the wheel on the transformation, right? We think, I need to be more patient. And so we pray for patience, and then we try and help God out by standing in the longest line. That we're trying to do things to advance God's work in our life instead of just resting in him. And this is the epiphany of Thomas Cook's, that no, if I was seen right before God simply by believing and putting my faith or my trust in him, then I don't need to worry about working out the rest. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6. All right, so it doesn't matter how successful we are. Think about Thomas Cook's 5,000 conversions, right? I mean, if that doesn't make you the cool kid at the Christian potluck, I don't know what would, I guess. But it doesn't matter how successful we are in what we do, whether that's something we're doing for the Lord or something we're doing at our job or whatever we do. It doesn't matter how important, how successful, how bright the lights might shine on our lives. We all have misconceptions about Jesus. Every single one of us. There's none not righteous. No, not one, right? No one is righteous. So following Jesus means a life of ongoing change, that we have to lean into the transformation that God is doing in us. Now, I want to share a video with you, and this is from a really cool channel. There's a lot of really great videos on this. I suggest, go if you're looking for something to listen to that will really touch your heart and inspire you, check out some of the videos on this channel. This is De La Fe Testimonies, I guess. De La Fe, D-E-L, you can see it down there in the bottom left, D-E-L-A-F-E with an accent acute or accent grave, whichever one that is, with a little accent, Testimonies. Check out their YouTube channel. I found this story about Danny Hahn, and I thought this is a great example of change and how we all need to change, but there's an intersection between our theology and our transformation. And this is why we can never dismiss someone. We'll come back to that in just a minute, but I want to start in with Danny's story, and we'll pause it and comment a few times throughout. Any minute here. Come on now. All right.
As far as, knowing somebody personally, I was like the most miserable person. And at that time,
All right, gang, let me try this again. I heard it's not coming through at times. Trying a new feature in the studio. Let's go back here and hear this. We're going to hear basically
in greater
4 seconds.
pain. But as far as, knowing somebody personally, I was like the most miserable person. And at that time, I thought my problem was philosophical. But afterwards, I realized a lot of it, probably most of it was psychological or emotional. It's because of my family background. A lot of our picture of God, consciously, mentally, we may say, I believe in God, such and such. But at the gut level, I believe a lot of our images of God is superimposed with our parents. And, when somebody's personal history is so miserable, at least for me, it was difficult, I think, at the subconscious level to imagine God really loved me. I think that was the main question. And of course, it was complicated with the philosophical issues that I was dealing with.
Take a moment and think about that. It was complicated with the philosophical issues that he was dealing with. The things that we struggle with and the things that the people around us struggle with, oftentimes we say, well, there's things that I'm going to lean in and talk to my friend about because he's really hurting. And we say the amount of emotional pain is the only thing I'm going to deal with, not the mental turmoil. And when someone is wrestling with God and we're not willing to handle that, then the emotional pain is oftentimes downhill of the thing that we believe about God. And that is massively important, right? Like, what we believe about God determines how we relate to God on some level. He might not be that way, but think about Thomas Cook. Thomas Cook, not Crook. Totally different guy. All right, so Thomas Cook. And think about that guy. He's saying, here I accepted a gospel of justification by faith, but I was still trying to find my sanctification through works. And how did that affect his everyday life and the relationships of the people around him as he tried to work on his own merits for his salvation? And here, Danny Hahn is dealing with deep depression. And does God even love me? Is a deep, deep question. Now, I'm going to listen on. I think it's this next part, but you'll forgive me if I skip ahead here a minute. And I would encourage you to go watch this whole interview. It's a great interview, and this is a really cool channel. So if you're looking for some inspiration and to connect with real people and their real stories, man, check out De La Fay Testimonies. You can tell they don't pay me because I don't even know how to say their name. All right.
So I spent most of my college life in great misery. come the beginning of senior year, I was in school for like a week early before school started because I had some little retreat that I had to attend. The funny thing was, in my totally confused state, I was going to church every week. I was actually going to Christian fellowship I had become a leader, although I was which is ironic. But anyway, my senior year comes and, I was living in an apartment with 2 other roommates and I'm there alone a week earlier. And one morning I wake up and I think I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. I think I'm right at the edge. I don't know what's going to happen to me. So I actually went to see a school therapist, school counseling center. Now everybody goes there, but back then, not many people went. But I kind of go because I think I need help. If I don't do something, I may actually lose it. So I go, and this psychologist comes out and he interviews me for 30 minutes. And at the end, he says, "Well, I would like to see you twice a week for next 6 months." Which I realized was a diagnosis that said I was in big trouble. Typically you go once a week, it's like twice a week, But after I came out, I never went back because I just didn't feel he could help me. He's like, for 30 minutes, he asked me a bunch of questions with a notepad, never looking at me. And I thought, you cannot help me. So I never went back.
How powerful is that? Looking at the notepad, never looking at him. And we talk about all the time. What have we been talking about this week? Trust, right? When we empathize with someone and can see through their eyes, we earn their trust. And he didn't trust that this guy could help him. Sitting there looking at his notepad. He wasn't seeing through this guy's eyes. He was trying to solve this guy's problem. Looking at this guy through... And maybe his psychoanalyst, maybe his counseling summation or analyzation of him of Danny is right. Maybe that was the thing. But do we see the human sitting across from us, and whatever issue they're wrestling with, are we willing to set down our rightness? Are we willing to humble ourselves and consider others better than us? Are we willing to be like Jesus and wash the feet? And so we say, oh yeah, I'll go wash the feet because it'll make me a good Christian. No, you're not doing it right. It was the smelly servant's task that was embarrassing. And he was lowering himself to the thing that everyone in the room thought was beneath them. And so if everyone in the room looks at washing feet as a Jesus thing, you're not lowering yourself by doing it. You have to do something that's actually lowering yourself, and listening and understanding people. That's a big thing. Especially if you're in a room or a climate where someone wants to talk about something that is just extremely taboo for the culture. Just think about the opportunity that guy missed and how much we talk about hearing and loving and considering each other.
But that weekend, we were at a tiny retreat. And I think it was Saturday morning or Sunday morning, our leader told us, all right, you have what we call extended quiet time. I think we had like 3 hours to spend with God alone. And I went to this small chapel. I had my head against the back of the pew in front of me. And I just broke down, I cannot cry usually, I'm so repressed, I cannot cry. I rarely cry even these days, but I just broke down and I said, Lord, God, I know that you are there. I know it. I know that you exist. But I don't know if you are for me or against me. I don't know if you love me or you hate me. If you're for me, please help me.
What a cool moment. And how many of us don't even bother to ask? So when we develop trust, the counselor in that room could have heard that. He could have heard that profession from Danny. If Danny had trusted him, if he felt like that guy was empathizing with him. We'll never know what would have been, but we can at least imagine that maybe it would have been possible if that counselor hadn't been in his paper. I want to see you 2 times a week for the next 6 months. Wow. You know, you leave feeling broken and damaged instead of heard and understood and empathized with. That's never the way, you know, Jesus is pick up your mat and walk. Not, well, we need to do this mud and spittle thing a couple times a week for the next 6 months, right? And so here he's wrestling with this idea. He doesn't know if God is for him or against him. How many of us have wrestled with that too, if we're honest with ourselves? Found ourselves in situations where it's like, man, my life's not awesome right now. God, all I've been doing is following you. I know I haven't been perfect, but give me a break, man. Why am I dealing with this? I think, well, I better be a good Christian. I can't say those things. I can't say that to God. And God's big enough and tough enough for that. But wouldn't it be great if we could say that to our fellow brother or sister and not get judged or fixed, or not have them consider us the weaker Christian, but just sit with us in the moment and sit with us in the pain? So I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit, and hopefully I don't, we'll just keep going here. There's just maybe a 5-minute chunk here I want to get through with him. Really powerful story.
Because there's no one that can help me. No one can help me. And I said, if you're against me, I'm screwed. That's what I said literally. If you're against me, I'm screwed. If you can help me, help me. And I came out. The semester started. I totally forgot about the prayer. And I was an absolute basket case. I had a full-blown insomnia. I could not sleep at night. But I'm a good Asian boy, so I go to every class. Sleep through every class. My professor could not believe it. I sleep through every class. I cannot sleep at night. And I'm just struggling. And this goes on for like a month or a month and a half. Over the summer, I had become really good, built up really good friendship with a fellow Christian who happened to be a psychology major. And, we talk constantly. And then this one November, Saturday morning, so like Friday, she said, hey, let's get together tomorrow morning. So we get together at 11 o'clock. In Chicago in November, it's kind of chilly. And she says, Danny, today you'll tell me about your father and your brother. Now, my father had caused a lot of pain. I thought all my issues were about my father. Later on, it turned out I had a lot of issues with my mother as well. But anyway, back then. And my brother, who received the brunt of the family dysfunction, was very violent toward me. He was in a gang, he used to beat me up and all that. So I replied to her, no, I will not talk about my father and my brother. And she said, you will. I said, no, I will not. She said, you will. No, I will not. And I began to walk away. And she began to chase after me. Tell me about your father and your brother. So I will not. That went on for the next 7 hours. Literally. She chased me all over the campus. She just would not let me get just all over. Finally, we decided to go to dinner together. So after we ordered food, as soon as the waitress went away, she asked me again, tell me about your father and brother. And for whatever reason, all my defense had gone down. And I began to talk. I don't even know what I talked about, but I began to talk about my family, And at that moment, in my mind, I had this picture, mental picture.
This is a really cool analogy that he's got, but again, why I'm playing this, and I'm going to skip over a little bit of his analogy here. It's a really cool image that he's got, but the persistence of others in our life. And should we be so blessed that someone in our life just won't stop coming after us in love and kindness, to hear us and to wrestle with God with us, and to know that there's something and not let us just walk away. That we're one body with many members. Each member belongs to all the others. And when we start to see someone else's struggle with God and struggle with theology and struggle with what's going on as our struggle too, and not our struggle to fix as if we're over them, but their struggle is our struggle because we're under them serving the way Jesus would, that we're carrying their burden with love. We're trying to get at it. That we would have someone pursue us that way and hear us that way. And gosh, it's my hope that you all have people like that in your life, and that God would bring people like that to your life. But also that you and I, we could be that for other people. That's how we sow unity. But we don't just limit that to discussions about our feelings and our relational pains. Behind all of this, the one thing that he's not talking about, that he keeps hinting at, is the philosophical concepts that he's wrestling with about the goodness of God. Those also matter. And as we shift what we understand about God, we shift how we relate to him as well. And it comes from both sides and from both ends. And the thing to remember is that whatever is coming out of a person's mouth is the most important thing to them. And if they want to start with the theology, that's just where we are. We don't need to dig under it. We just need to wrestle with it. For some people, they have a hard time relating with God because Calvin and Arminius. Some people have a hard time relating with God because eschatology, dispensationalism, covenant theology, age of the earth. Some people, these theological issues and the moments and baptism, the things that we divide over in our Christian faith, affect how people relate to God. If they didn't matter on that level, we wouldn't divide over them. That just assumes that all division is just because we're jerks. And then that paints everyone who ever wants to do anything different because they have some kind of a principled stand as fundamentally a jerk. And it denies us the right to stand for anything. Because the moment you say, well, I don't see it that way, and so I'm passionate about it, well, now you're part of the problem. Not, you're standing for something. And then Jesus becomes basically nothing for us. So what we think in our theology, it affects how we relate to God. That's so important. And all of the things he's dealing with are also changing how he's perceiving God. And yet he had someone who was persistent enough in his life. So he talks about this analogy. Well, I wasn't going to play it. I'll play. We're this far into the video. If YouTube hates me for playing this much of it, then so be it. But check out his analogy and kind of the thing that he envisioned that helped him understand a little bit of what's going on.
And in my head, I saw this glass bottle. Now, when I grew up in Korea, Korea was very poor. It's not like today. It was very poor. And when you went to get cooking oil, you didn't buy a new one and throw out the old bottle. People would actually take that bottle and go to this place where you get it refilled, a local, whatever, oil refinery, okay, cooking oil. And then you will bring it back. Now, I had this picture of this bottle, and it was so filthy. Outside, it was like full of like mixture of oil and dust, just gunk, And inside was even worse. It was like this thick black poison. And as I began to talk, this image came to me. And as I began to talk, the lid was open. And this poison was so intense, it began to evaporate, That's the picture I saw. And I immediately understood what that meant. That bottle was me, and inside of me was such hatred and anger, which I had suppressed because I was supposed to be a good Christian, But I had so much anger, which I had suppressed. It had turned into this poison. And it was that poison that was making me depressed and kind of mentally go crazy, almost have a nervous breakdown. And as I began to talk, it was beginning to be released.
Just listening sometimes is enough. People have complicated, difficult theological positions. They have difficult things that they believe, that they're wrestling with. Just listening. Sometimes you think, oh, he's got the newspaper and Revelation out, and I got to listen to this thing, and he's going to tell me all this stuff. But sometimes just listening. When we say something out loud, I know for me, when I think something dumb, and I say it out loud, I go, oh, well, that was dumb. Hold on a minute. You could see the gears start to work when we start to say it. And so just being someone who listens helps people wrestle with what they believe and how they relate to Jesus. And it can also let us get rid of the anger and the poison and the bitterness. But we have to have trust enough. We have to know that the person is going to see it our way. Right? That's what empathy is about, that we're seeing it. That we don't have to validate someone else's truth. We just have to set aside our understanding of things enough to sit with someone else and see the box that they're trapped in, and to see it for what it is, and not just say, oh, that's simple, you just need to dump that phrase from your vocabulary. You just need to is the second half of a phrase that begins, the problem with you is, and that's judgment. Instead, we sit and we try and understand. And when we do that, we earn their trust. And when we earn their trust, then they're going to be transparent, and they're going to tell us about their anger with God, their frustration. And maybe that's enough, like Danny, that all that stuff just begins to work itself out, and God begins to work in them as we listen, as we demonstrate one of the character aspects of God, listening. One of the character aspects of God, empathy. And not toxic empathy where we adopt someone else's truth because they feel that way. The truth is still the truth. We're talking about seeing through someone else's eyes without lowering what truth is, right? And when we do that, we develop trust, and then we can work through these issues together because we're on the same team. We could stop throwing Bible verses at each other, and we could start hearing and understanding and developing true community and true intimacy, right? And all the counselors say, into me, see, right? But that's what it is, that someone could see into our lives, that we're not blocking them from seeing that. What a powerful story, and what a beautiful thing that Danny's friend did by pursuing him for 7 hours. And then, it wouldn't be, we gotta end and hear how this affected Danny on the other side of this.
Walking home, she had gone her way, and I was walking home, which was about 15-minute walk from that restaurant to my apartment. And there were not that many people on the street. And as I was walking, in this darkness, I had all these questions about the love of God for years now. But for the first time, it was like the heaven had drawn the heaven had come down low. I could feel. And I could feel the love of God.
Awesome. Yeah, go back and watch that whole interview. It's a great interview. And really, that's what we want. I think about that hymn, "This is my Father's world." Oh, let me never forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. Man, it's early. Just don't give me any Dr. Seuss before noon, all right? But that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. And the question is the kingdom of heaven breaking through right now? When Jesus said, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven," was that something that he wanted us to pray in futility until one final day when the earth is blown up and then it's completely remade? Or is that something that God wanted us to pray so that the kingdom could break through into this world right now and among us. And when he talks about that, heaven came down, that moment that the burden was gone and the healing of God through the renewal of his mind, right? These are the things that affect us. When we lean into what matters to someone else, and we dare not tell someone else what matters to them. So if they come at us with Calvin, if they come at us with baptism or salvation or age of the earth or eschatology, women in ministry, whatever the thing is, when we try and find some kind of a way where we say, well, that's not the greater thing, all we're telling them is, I don't have time to hear your burden and to sit with you in it. Because I've predetermined that your burden is non-essential. Your burden is the minor, and I'm dealing with the majors. So don't major in the minors, or minor in the majors. So you've got your compass all backwards. And until you drop what matters to you, what you're struggling with, I can't hear you. You're not there to me. How is that not exactly what Jesus told us not to do in Matthew 5? Call our brother a moron. Raka, you're an idiot. Just come back when you got the right thing. So we lay our lives down for each other. And so what a bright spot it was that, there's a kingdom moment. There's a kingdom moment when Danny's friend takes the time to listen. When Danny's friend takes the time to pursue him because she knows there's a problem. And she's not going to be like the counselor stuck in her paper. And you don't have to be a counselor. You have to be someone who shows up persistently in the lives of the people around you, and don't miss them. Don't miss them, because they're the greatest treasure you've got. So when we're serious about following Jesus, then change is in our future, no matter how long we've followed Jesus. Lean into the change. Here's a couple of points that just to take away from this video. That the relatable, and Danny's dealing with a very relatable problem. Does God love me? Is God for me? Or is God against me? And people of faith wrestle with that. And oftentimes when we're a person of faith, we feel like we can't be honest with our struggles with God because we don't have an open environment, because we don't trust, and we don't trust what people will do or say with us. Could I lose my ministry position by saying I really have this struggle? I'm going to suppress it. And when we suppress our struggles, we bend towards dualism. We have the real us that we don't share and the fake us that we present for others. And that it divides us in some sense. And we want to be made whole. And so we need transparent environments. But realize that there's a lot of theology behind this wrestling. This isn't just, does God love me or not? How are my feels? Does God love me or not? I can't conceive of a God who would. Because that doesn't make sense to me. And so it's both the philosophical, the theological, and the practical, and the relational, and the emotional, and the contextual of his life. It's all of those things together. And so someone took the time with Danny Hahn, and persisted, and we can persist. There are so many great people in the kingdom of heaven, and most of them we never know their names. And making an impact in someone's life, it's not about being a person who influences crowds. It's not about having bright lights shine on us. It's about being present and believing the best about others. And it's difficult sometimes to believe the best when they tell us what they're really struggling with. But believe the best about others. Live in humility, that could easily be me, and I need to understand. And give grace. Just continuing to point people to Jesus in every moment. And that's what it means to be great in the kingdom. To be the least, right? When we say like a child, faith like a child, Jesus says that, and people think, oh, like an innocent little child. No, children are not innocent. Children are little monsters, and we're trying to civilize them over time. The point is that children were the least in society, and that we should be like the least in society, and serve and be okay with the lowly position. Be okay washing feet. And then look, the last thing I want to say about that video is a lot of deep thinking, and a lot of your intellectual friends have deep emotions behind the things that they're saying. And they're trying to invite you to wrestle with those by asking you to consider theology. They don't want to put their emotions out there, because if they start talking about how they feel about it, then the real thing for the intellectual and the rational person, it's the philosophy that is affecting the feelings, not the feelings affecting the philosophy. And some of us have that a little backwards in how we work in the world. But for the rational or intellectual, to try and deal with the feelings and not the content is to deny their soul, to look at them and go, you don't matter, and I'm going to deal with what's downhill of what you're wrestling with. So to alleviate their feelings, sometimes you have to wrestle with the deeper theology. And, you know, it wasn't insignificant, the things that Danny was wrestling with in the philosophy, even though he brushed over them a little bit. So look, don't devalue someone else's concern because we don't think it's important. Value others the way God values you. Value the concerns of others the way God values your concerns. Be like Jesus to them. Live like Jesus with others and for others. All right? Stick with it. You've got this, and God's got you. So just lean into a life that looks like Jesus. God, there are so many opportunities we miss. Open our eyes to the beauty of the relationships that we have and the people around us, and help us be better listeners and understanders of others. Help us lean into the possibility that maybe as we're listening, we need to change too. That maybe we've turned an issue into a polarization situation, and really there's another way. Guide us with your light. Guide us with your truth. Help us, transform us more into the image of your Son, so that we can experience more of these moments in our lives. Amen. Man, I'm really grateful to, what was it? I got to go back. De La Fe Testimonies. De La Fe Testimonies, I think. So really grateful to those guys. Look, it wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't point out my socials. So I guess I got to start selling coffee now too, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to sell coffee. That's not my bag. But connect with us on Facebook or on Instagram. I'll get it right. On X, it's at Take Up Your X, Take Up Your Cross, right? Take Up Your X. Facebook, a Jesus Followers Podcast. Same on Instagram, a Jesus Followers Podcast. Rumble is Jesus Follower Podcast, and YouTube is Jesus Follower Channel. Reach out. We've got a lot of videos on there. Leave a comment. We're going to engage with intellectual honesty. Unless you're asking me to promote my channel, then, thank you, but no thank you. I'm good. Sorry. Maybe some of you guys have seen the bots. I can't always get to all those comments and delete them, but if it's a real person and you're really trying to start a business, God bless you, and I hope it goes well. But thanks, but no thanks. Look, recap of the show. Be a bright spot. Okay? The bright spots are the examples that we can look to. And when you notice a bright spot, log it. Store it in your heart and in your mind so that you have some way of going, that's what that looks like when we sow peace, when I hear someone, and when I lean into this transformational life with others. Be a bright spot. And remember people like Danny in your life. Remember the people around you. That you don't have to be awesome at anything to shut your mouth and open your ears. And I say that as someone who has the hardest time keeping my mouth shut. But it doesn't really, there's no real cost, and there's only benefit, because you just leave people feeling loved and heard and respected, and you create moments where Jesus breaks through and the kingdom breaks through. Ultimately, if it matters to them, it should matter to us, right? Look, I say this every day, and I say it because I really mean it. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you would tune into a podcast about how we can sow greater unity in Christianity, how we can work backwards from the denominationalism, and how we can find a greater agreement about who Jesus is by engaging in these conversations with each other. I'm truly blessed that you're here, and I'm just very grateful for you. So thank you very much, and it is my deep hope that the light of Jesus would shine on your path today as you pursue him. Be well.
Yes, you now have a concert side table at the fabulous Blue Note, Madison near Dearborn, Chicago's Mecca for moderns, and for the people who play it that way. Currently, the Blue Note is featuring Count Basie, his famous piano, and his big new band. Yes, it's what you've been waiting for. It's Count Billy Basie, and here's the man himself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Count Basie and the band. Sincerely, you're going to enjoy. We hope you enjoy our little program, because we're going to have fun working for you. Now, in our first number, we feature Joe Newman on trumpet, Eddie Lockjaw Davis on tenor. A little thing we call the Blee Blop Blues.